sitting here and editing this video, I'd say close to 2 months since I filmed it, and that is completely my fault. I just got so caught up in the start of spring semester and also wrapping up my finals from winter session that it just completely went over my head, which I'm so sorry about. But I'm editing it now, it's going up, and I promise I'm going to be better about my videos in the future, which I know I've said that before and I haven't really lived up to it, but I promise I'll be uploading more videos in the future. So please forgive me, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of this video. It's been a long time since my last real YouTube video, and even longer since I've sat down and talked to the camera. I think it's almost been a year, maybe 10 months-ish. That is mainly because of how overwhelming the whole semester has been here at RISD, which I will get into the details of that later on in the video. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys all about my experience as a freshman during my first semester here at RISD, which is a lot. So I'm going to be listing all the categories I'll be talking about somewhere on the screen, and you guys can either watch the whole thing or skip to whatever category you're interested in. So before I get started, I just want to put a little disclaimer out there that everyone's experience here at RISD is very different, especially during foundation year. Okay, I don't know what's going on outside, but it's really loud. I'm in my dorm right now. They're doing something on my floor, I don't know what it is, but if you guys hear noise, it's coming from outside. I'll try to talk over it, but it is kind of loud. Yeah, so before I get started, I wanted to put a little disclaimer out there that everyone's experience here at RISD is really different, especially depending on the professors that you get during foundation year, because every professor teaches in a different way. They teach a different curriculum and they're focused in different areas, so it really is different for every person. Also, one thing is that when I'm talking about my courses, I'm going to be focusing on the actual curriculum and the coursework itself rather than the professors, and that is just because I don't want any of my personal biases towards any professors to maybe scare people or cause any more rumors that aren't already out there. And again, everyone's relationship with a professor is different, so because of that, no matter how strongly I might feel towards a certain professor, I won't be talking about that. This is just because I know I'm gonna get comments asking oh, who's the mean professor, blah blah blah, but that's just not something I'm gonna be talking about in this video. So I'm gonna start off talking about what's most people are probably most interested in, and that is the courses. As a freshman at RISD, you don't get to choose your courses. They are automatically loaded in for you, and you will have 5 courses. Of those 5, 3 of those are your 8-hour studio courses, which are obviously all day, and you get an 1-hour break in between. And those 3 would be drawing foundations, design foundations, and spatial dynamics. The other 2 courses that are left are your 2 liberal courses. So you have 1 art history liberal and 1 English liberal. So I'm gonna start off by talking about my most difficult class that I had this semester, which was my drawing foundations. For this class, I had Professor Masha Riskin, who is pretty infamous here at RISD as being one of the freshman drawing professors that teach a very difficult course. So for Masha's class, every week we had a homework assignment that was on 40 by 60 inch paper, which, to put that in perspective, that's 5 feet tall and almost 3.5 feet wide. I think this is true for most freshmen when I say that coming into RISD, a piece of paper that is that size is very intimidating. But for me, as the semester went along and every assignment was on a piece of paper that large, I got used to it. And now when I look at a piece of paper that size, yes, it's still large, but it's not something that I'm afraid of anymore. Also, I have to say that RISD professors love large scale projects. 2 of the 3 professors I had, they really liked it when our projects were large. So, and I also see other people working on things in the workroom that are giant. So if you're coming into RISD, that is definitely one thing you should keep in mind, that don't be surprised when a professor throws you like a giant assignment. It's pretty normal and you'll get used to it. And there's also lots of benefits with working large as well. So I'm not going to go over all of my projects in this class just because we had so many, but I will be picking out 3. So this first one is actually a project that lasted a course of 2 weeks. So the first week our assignment was just to draw multiple parts of different skeletons from life onto 40 by 60 paper, and the next week we brought it in and she gave us our next assignment, which was to erase the whole thing and redraw it. And the objective was that we would be able to work with sort of the ghost of our last drawing and what was left and create something else from that. And everyone in my class, when we got that assignment, we were like, why? Because we're expected to spend around 10 hours on each drawing. Most of us stayed up really late the night before class to finish it, and to go in that morning and have her tell us to erase the whole thing and redo it was just so devastating for so many of us. But I do think that the second week after, a lot of us were able to learn from the whole process of erasing and redrawing our work. And I think that ultimately it was somewhat rewarding, even though I had used like a full 2 erasers just to erase it, and the process of doing it was so heartbreaking. This next piece I'm going to be talking about is also a multiple week piece. I believe we spent 3 weeks on this one. Yeah. So I guess we call this the 4th dimension drawing. And what we had to do was, the first week she told us to blindfold ourselves and carry like our 40 by 60 inch paper around and feel a space, and we were supposed to draw the feeling of the space, which obviously is very like what does that mean? So basically after that it was a very abstract scribble-like drawing, and then we are supposed to take the blindfold off and work with what we have and create a drawing that really displays the feeling of the space. But then we kind of got to crit, and she didn't really like the pieces that our class had come up with, so she had us continue working on that piece for the next week, and so that's what we did, and we brought it in again the following week. And I do have to say that they were a lot more strong the following week. Finally, what we had to do to this drawing was, so we had to use collage, gesso, wet charcoal, different Conte crayons, and basically she wanted us to like destroy her piece, and show through the collage materials the fourth dimension, which I don't really know how to explain it. She wasn't really that clear on explaining it to us, and no one in our class like understood what it meant. But yeah, this is what I did, I guess, to display my fourth dimension. The last project I'm going to talk about is our charcoal animation, which is like the Masha project. Like, I'm pretty sure everyone at RISD knows what the charcoal animation is just because it's so talked about, and people who are in her class complain about it so much because it's so much work. So this was our final project, our final assignment, and we had to do 20 frames per second for 2 minutes, at least 20 frames per second for 2 minutes, which came out to be like 2,400 frames, which is insane. So 24, and it all had to be hand drawn. So what we did was we draw a little bit, take a picture, draw a little bit, take a picture, draw a little bit, take a picture, 2,400 times, which is completely insane. I had stayed at school the entire Thanksgiving break, and the entire break I was working on this charcoal animation. It took so incredibly long to make, but I have to say that the end result, like watching everyone's animations during Final Crit, it was insane. Like, everyone's work was so good and incredible. The next studio I'm going to talk about would be Spatial Dynamics, which for us is basically like anything three-dimensional or spatial. So for spatial, I had Professor Ben Jurgensen, and he is really good at making you think. He really does try to push his students to make us think more about what we're making and why we're making it and how we can push ourselves even further. So for spatial, we did have a total of 3 large-scale projects. The first one was our Memory Palace artifact project. And a Memory Palace is basically just a way to memorize a certain, whatever you're trying to memorize. You basically build your own like house or whatever, and you put things in the house in your mind to help you remember certain things. We had created our own memory palaces the week before, and he wanted us to pick an artifact from that palace and create it out of cardboard. And he didn't have like a scale limitation really, but he wanted it to be big. Which, like, looking back on it, it's really not, my project really wasn't that big compared to like the projects that we did later on. And you know, for me, I'm not a spatial person. I've never really done a lot of three-dimensional work before, so this was my first real like investment in making a sculpture. The second assignment was our 2x4 challenge, where basically he gave us a 2" by 4" by 8 feet piece of wood, and he wanted us to use that and one other material to contain or take up the most amount of space. First time I made this like web like thing, and the whole idea was that people would go in it, want to take pictures, play around with the yarn, and stay in it, and that would contain space since people both physically in our class came from all over the world. We have a lot of international students, but also it would capture people's different experiences and histories in that web. I actually really liked this project, and I think a few of my classmates also really liked my project, but Ben didn't like it, so I didn't really get a good grade on that one. So I ended up resubmitting it, and for my resubmission, what I made was this swing that was supposed to embody like an airplane seat. It it was supposed to physically, like, you would be able to swing it, and in that way it would take up a lot of space. And also metaphorically, it's an airplane seat, and airplanes travel all over the world, and that's also how it would take up space. I do like my airplane seat, but I also do like my first project, and I would say I'm equally satisfied with both renditions of the 2x4 challenge. And I did learn a lot from this, since I've never worked with wood before, like, ever. And finally, we have our final project. The whole idea was that you're supposed to make a project that, once expanded, would not be able to fit through any of the doors in the studio, but it has to be able to be compressed into this, like, shipping box that our teacher gave us, which was 12 by 12 by 9. We also had to include an element to make it non-photographable. I basically recreated this red carpet scene, and I had made a door, like a car door, out of fabric, and then I hung this top that I bought and the skirt that I made as, like, one dress piece from a hanger, so no actual human in it. I had, like, this red carpet coming out under it, and it's like that rope that, like, lines the red carpet. I made these, like, circles out of fabric that were supposed to represent cameras, and then in a few of them I put flashlights to imitate cameras flashing. And then while I was presenting my project, I had an audio that included, like, sounds of cameras flashing, people booing, like, gasping. At the same time, I was texting everyone in my class different headlines of celebrities being body shamed and being called out for whatever they were wearing. Basically, all the negative attention that mostly female celebrities get based on their bodies that naturally should not be perfect, what they're wearing, who they're wearing, basically slut shaming these celebrities. The third and final studio that we had was Design Foundations, and this has to have been my favorite studio I've had first semester. So for design, I had Vivian Charlesworth, who is such a sweet angel. Again, 3 large assignments overall. And so the first one was bad color. She had a bunch of, like, color swatches on the table, and she had us choose 5 that we thought were really nice and worked well together, and 5 that we absolutely hated and thought were disgusting next to each other. She kind of, like, surprised us and told us that we had to use the 5 disgusting colors as our color palette. We could use, like, a little bit of black and white, but it had to be, like, our color palette had to be those 5 colors. Our project was to create a game board. It didn't have to be a playable game board, but it had to be sort of, like, game board inspired. I took the game Mahjong, which is, like, this Chinese game with a bunch of different tiles, and I kind of created, like, a flat version of it. It's obviously not playable, but I do think that the final project came out somewhat good, given the colors that I had. I think the whole objective of this project was to eventually realize that you can make bad colors look good, and you were supposed to kind of come to like the colors that you used. I agree. A lot of people in my class were able to make bad colors look really nice, and I don't think that my painting is that nasty, but I still hate the colors. So our second project was to create an artist's book, a visual version of an artist manifesto. I wanted to show kind of the feeling of home for me and what that means. Since I was born and raised in California, obviously that's where I consider home, but also Shanghai, China is a place that I've frequently visited with my mom throughout my life, and I also consider that a second home and very dear to me. And so it's sort of that like duality of what the term home means for me. And also part of it is coming to RISD, this new place, and sort of learning to make this home for me as well. But my original idea was to make 10 scrolls of paper, sort of like those Chinese paintings, which I did do. I think they're about like this big, which like 14 by 19, 12, somewhere around there, which isn't too large. It's pretty small actually, and I spent like $40, which is insane. And when he printed it, the colors were so off that like I had a light blue and it printed out as white, and it was really drastic. So what I did was I went to our school's like printers like in our library, and I printed it out again smaller, and then I just used like scraps of paper and I made a small accordion book to go with it. The smaller version, the colors are right, but the quality was really bad. So it was really frustrating because when I look at my projects on a computer, it looks like it's just the way I want it. I like the way it looks, but then like physically it just didn't really turn out the way I wanted it to, which is pretty disappointing for me. So our final project was an experimental film, and this is mainly to teach us how to use Premiere. Mine was basically about different changes and what going through those changes mean for me, and how to deal with them. I don't really know how to describe it, it's just this video that I made. It's also up on my channel. If you want to watch it, I will also link that down below. There was a lot more that I wanted to do for my video, and at the time when I turned it in, I was not feeling so super confident about it. But like kind of looking back on it now, I am satisfied with it. There really was only so much I could do with the time and other limitations that I had. For the two liberal classes, one of them is again the English class and one of them is art history class. For the English class, we meet twice a week for an hour and a half each, and it's a literature class. And again, depending on the professor, it's pretty different. I had Professor Megan Finch. I really did enjoy her class. It was pretty philosophical, can get pretty confusing. I don't know, from what I've heard of other teachers, I did really enjoy my class. There is a lot of writing and reading. Most definitely is harder than like AP English classes from high school. You know, I hate to say this, but I think the professors do know that RISD students aren't really prioritizing our liberal courses. You know, our studios do take up a lot more of our time, but I think that we are still able to work with that and learn a lot from those classes as well. The only class that I would say every freshman at RISD has the same experience of is our art history course. We call it THAD. I totally forgot what it stands for. It's basically an art history course. There are 2 lecture halls every week, and those last for an hour each, and then one small seminar class that meets for an hour and a half each week. And basically we just go to lectures, take notes, learn all about the pieces, and then we talk about it during our class. And we had 1 essay, 1 midterm test, and 1 final test. And the midterm and final, everyone has it at the same time. I think different teachers have different content on those tests, but overall it's pretty standard for all the freshmen. And I had Professor Dyson for that. So grading here at art school is extremely difficult to sort of understand when you're first coming in from a high school. Everything about art is very subjective, and you may create in a certain style that you really enjoy and some people really enjoy, but the professor you get might not enjoy it, and so that might affect the overall grade you receive in the course. Because of that, none of it should be taken too personally, especially during critiques. Obviously, critiques are very important to helping you grow and improve as an artist, but you know, nothing should be taken personal. Each professor also does grade differently. For 2 of my studios, the teachers didn't give us our grade until like we finished the course and we just got our final grade. So we really didn't know how we were doing in that class until we got an actual grade. The only way you would know like how you're doing is if you were absolutely failing the class and you would get like a midterm warning. But other than that, like if you were doing fine, you would get no emails, no updates. We had no idea what grade we were gonna get until we got it. And that is unfortunately true for most studio courses, I would say, in most art schools. The only class that I got specific grades for specific projects was Spatial, and that was actually really helpful. It's something that I wish most teachers would do. But anyways, it's a whole like complicated mess. You know, again, you shouldn't take anything too personally. Everything is there for a reason. The workload is so insane here. I don't think a lot of people realize how much work RISD is. For sure is the hardest out of all the art schools. I have talked to people who go to Brown and they don't have half as much work as we do, and it's kind of insane. But at the same time, I do kind of get it because, you know, art is an extremely difficult path to go down, and you know, it does make sense that we would have to eventually work harder to achieve certain career goals, but like when you're doing it in the moment, it is so difficult. Like all our studio classes are 8 a.m. classes because since they last all day, you can't really have them start later in the day. We have 8-hour studios. Most teachers want us to work on homework assignments for at least the length of the studio class. I know my drawing teacher told us 10 hours per assignment. I know my spatial teacher at one point told me that I had 30 hours of work that I needed to do on my project within a week, which is so insane. And I would say the biggest thing that I would complain about RISD is the fact that it's built on the side of a hill, which I don't know whose idea it was. Like it just doesn't make sense to me, because especially when you're going to drawing studio or spatial studio, you usually have, like, for us, you know, giant rolls of paper, giant super heavy pads and drawing boards. For spatial, you know, our giant heavy toolbox, giant projects, and going up and down the hill with all of that multiple times a day is so incredibly tiring, especially after long studio hours. I heard it's because Brown was established around 100 years earlier than us, so they took out the flat space on the top of the hill, so we were kind of forced to be on the hill, which still sounds like such a bad excuse for me. I would say that there are a lot of cons to RISD, which is not surprising because that exists, I think, for every school and every situation you're in. But I would say that the amount of resources, the amount of talent, and everything that we have here, I love being here. I love this school. There is so much to learn and so many resources that I kind of overlook these things since I do gain so much out of it. I mean, the amenities that we do have, I am living in North Hall, which is a brand new freshman dorm. I'm so grateful to have that opportunity. At the end of the day, the pros do outweigh the cons. RISD does have the title of being one of the best art and design schools in the world, and there is a reason for that. I have been able to learn a lot, and overall, I've really loved my experience here so far. I do hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I'm so glad to be back on my channel, and see you next time. Bye! I think she said something about it being how anxiety makes things feel closer to each other, or I don't know, but she said like being happy makes things feel further, or like something like that. I don't know. Fourth dimension, yeah.